Okay. Okay. Good afternoon, friends. It's a Saturday, and hope everybody will be waiting for the Sunday. I don't want to keep this class along. So, hope you all remember what we discussed the last time. Last class, the part one of peripheral nerve injuries was introduction to peripheral nerve injuries, and we just concentrated on radial nerve palsy. Today, we'll discuss about ulnar nerve and median nerve. Myself, Dr. Cherladan, Assistant Professor Ortho from MMC. Right. Can anybody tell me what is another popular name for median nerve?
Laborer nerve.
Very good. Exactly. So it's called laborer nerve. Doctor, can you tell me why it is called laborer's nerve?
Flexors of forearm supply.
Okay. Only forearm, is it?
And hand muscles.
Yeah,
Thenar
exactly. See, any activity which involves intense gripping or a strong muscle force of the hand, all those muscles are supplied by the median nerve. That's why it is called laborer's nerve. A brief review about the anatomy of the median nerve. The nerve roots, most popular textbooks say it's about, it derives its nerve root from C6 to T1, but some textbook also say it derives its nerve root from C5 as well. So it is formed by the union of the medial and lateral roots of the brachial plexus. And it is a mixed nerve, as we all know, right? It contains both sensory as well as motor components. And if you look at this diagram, you can see that in the arm segment, actually there is no branches that arise from the median nerve. Usually in the upper arm segment, it travels lateral to the brachial artery. It crosses over the brachial artery and comes to lie on the medial side as it reaches the elbow. And it enters into the forearm by traveling between the two heads of pronator teres, and then it gives supply to all these muscles. Now, if you all recollect the anatomy, the forearm muscles is divided into two by some textbooks and three, like superficial and deep. And some textbooks say the intermediate group, which is formed by the flexor digitorum superficialis. Now, all the superficial group of the anterior forearm muscles, except flexor carpi ulnaris, which is supplied by the ulnar nerve, are all except that particular muscle. All other muscles are supplied by the median nerve. The list is given here, and then all these muscles longus and flexor digitorum profundus. Again, there is a catch here because flexor digitorum profundus has got dual nerve supply. The lateral half is supplied by the median nerve, whereas the medial half is supplied by the ulnar nerve. Okay. And after supplying all these muscles, it travels between FDS and FDP in the anatomic plane. And just above the wrist, it becomes very superficial. And here it gives rise to the palmar cutaneous branch, which supplies the sensory area over the thenar eminence. Now, this branch of the median nerve travels superficial to the carpal tunnel. It doesn't go through the carpal tunnel, whereas the median nerve proper goes through the carpal tunnel. It finally divides into the recurrent branch and the palmar digital branch. Now, the intrinsic on the thenar eminence, they are supplied by the recurrent branch, and the lumbricals, the 1 and 2 on the lateral side, are supplied by the digital branch. The sensation of the lateral 3.5 fingers is by the median nerve. Now, a short review about the lumbrical muscle. Now, we all know that there are 4 lumbricals. The action of lumbricals is flexion of MCP and extension of the IP joint. This is the action of lumbricals. You can remember L for lumbricals, right? The 1 and 2, otherwise the lateral 2 are supplied by the median nerve, whereas the medial 2 are supplied by the ulnar nerve. Again, like we saw in the radial nerve palsy, median nerve palsy is divided into 2. Radial nerve, there were 3 types of injury: low, high, and very high. Whereas in the median nerve, it is only 2: low median nerve palsy and high median nerve palsy. In low median nerve palsy, the injury or pathology is is close to the wrist, right? It can be anything: traumatic, non-traumatic, degenerative. The most common degenerative condition is the carpal tunnel syndrome, where any reason which causes reduced capacity of the tunnel or increase in size of any of the anatomical structures within the tunnel can cause compression of the median nerve as it passes through this tunnel. The other traumatic conditions are carpal dislocations, even distal radius fracture, the reverse Colles fracture. Colles fracture has got a dorsal displacement, whereas the reverse Colles, which displaces ventrally, that can cause problems with related to the median nerve injury. And any penetrating injury, like in the suicidal cuts, people try to cut their vessels, but they land up cutting their nerve, median nerve. So in those penetrating injury, median nerve can be injured. So this is the level of lesion in low median nerve palsy. So what are all the clinical features of low median nerve palsy? The most important or easy to recognize sign is the loss of sensation of the lateral 3.5 fingers. Now, in case of lacerated wounds, where including the median nerve, the palmar cutaneous branch, if that part also gets severed, there is loss of sensation over the entire 3.5 fingers, including the palm. Whereas if suppose the palmar cutaneous branch is safe, otherwise like in carpal tunnel syndrome where it travels superficial to the flexor retinaculum, only the fingertips will be involved. So in pure low median nerve palsy, only the fingertips are involved. Whereas if the palmar cutaneous branch is also involved, then the sensation over the thenar eminence is also lost. Am I clear here? Any doubts in this? Because don't get confused here. Only if the palmar cutaneous branch is also involved, the thenar eminence sensation is lost. Otherwise, only the fingertips are lost. So the next thing is the ape thumb deformity. This happens because of wasting of the thenar muscles. Like you can see here, there is no muscle bulk visualized. This is the characteristic appearance of ape thumb. Classical, if you look at the hand of an ape, it appears this way, right? Because thumb is evolutionary development in humans, because we use thumb for many other purposes. That's the reason for our intelligence as well, right? So when the apes that don't use the thumb maximum, they have this flattening of the thenar eminence. This is called ape thumb deformity. And the median claw hand. Now there are three types of claw hand: median claw hand, ulnar claw hand, and total claw hand. Now what is clawing? Clawing is nothing but loss of lumbricals. Now I showed you that this is the action of lumbricals, the L. Otherwise, the flexion at MCP joint and extension at the IP joint. Now when the lumbricals are lost, this position is lost. Otherwise, this is called the intrinsic plus position, and hand goes into the intrinsic minus position. This is clawing. Extension at MCP joint and flexion at the IP joints, right? Now, if it happens in all four fingers, we call it as total claw. This occurs in peripheral neuropathy involving both median and as well as ulnar nerve. Whereas when median is only involved, this occurs. The ulnar, the ring and little are spared, whereas the clawing happens in middle and index finger, right? Like shown here. So this is the median claw hand. And the other clinical test for median nerve, the intrinsic muscles, or the pen test, where here we specifically check the abductor pollicis brevis. If you remember the radial nerve class, I was telling that the abductor pollicis longus causes the radial abduction. This is radial abduction, whereas this is palmar abduction. This action is by the abductor pollicis brevis muscle. And the patient, you keep the patient's hand flat on the table and keep a pen here, hold it here, parallel to the surface of the palm. The patient should be able to lift or abduct the thumb and touch the pen. This is called pen test. Any confusion in this test? Anybody wants me to demonstrate the test again? If any doubt anywhere, please unmute yourself and stop me. We can clarify the doubts then and there. Okay. Okay. Shall we proceed then?
Yes, sir.
Fine. So how to test opponent's pollicis? Now we all know that this action is opposition, right? Opposition involving both thumb and little finger. Now if you check the opposition of thumb alone, this is opposition. The pulp of thumb touching the base of little finger, right? This is thumb opposition. Now it is very difficult to check this action alone because it is also helped by the flexor pollicis longus muscle. Okay. So what we do is you support here. Otherwise, you just support the metacarpal like shown here. Okay. You just check whether the metacarpal is moving. You will feel the resistance. If the metacarpal is moving, the opponent's paralysis is working. Otherwise, it is not working. And there are few more pen tests in peripheral nerve injury. One other pen test is to know the loss of sweating. Otherwise, if you rub a pen along the surface of the palm, if there is no sweat, the pen glides smoothly, right? In case of sympathetic disturbances. Whereas if there is a layer of sweat, the pen feels a bit sticky on the hand. Okay. And one other catch here is you should not test flexor pollicis brevis. See this action, like we check for the opponents. The flexion at the MCP is by the flexor pollicis brevis, which has got a dual nerve supply. It is also supplied by the ulnar nerve. So when the median nerve is lost, still this action may be possible because of the deep head of the flexor pollicis brevis, which is supplied by the ulnar nerve. So usually we don't check flexor pollicis brevis. And this is the picture I showed you, right? The L for lumbrical muscles. If the patient is able to keep this position, the lumbricals are still intact. Now that formed low median nerve palsy. Now we'll move on to high median nerve palsy. In high median nerve palsy, whatever features we saw till now, they are all present. In addition to it, these are also present. The lesion here is at the level of elbow. Therefore, everything which is supplied by the median nerve is lost. The radial wrist flexors are lost. Radial wrist flexors, namely the flexor carpi radialis. The pronatas are lost. Pronator teres and pronator quadratus both are lost. The long finger flexors, the FDS for all fingers, or the 2 to 5 fingers, and the FDP for second and third finger, they are lost, right? So how to check them? The sign here is there is one more test called the Ochsner's clasping test. If you ask the patient to clasp both hands like this, the affected 2 fingers will stand out like this, right? This is called Ochsner's clasping hand because they have lost the long finger flexors for the index and the middle finger, right? The same test, if you remove one hand and if you check them, if you ask to make a fist like this, these 2 fingers will stand out. This is called Benedict sign or pointing index sign. If you have seen the videos of Vatican City where Pope used to do this, right? Pope's benediction. So the same, right? He keeps his fingers like this, right? Pope Christians would understand this better. He does this, okay? This is called Pope's benediction sign or pointing index sign or Ochsner's clasping test. All indicate the same. It is used to check the deep or the long finger flexors. Then comes the checking it individually. FDS and FDP. For FDS, which finger you are testing? Most commonly, we used to check the middle finger. You should actually arrest all other fingers in extension, right? Because there are some cross connections between these tendons, and therefore you just isolate the middle finger and you stabilize it, right? And then check for it. The proximal interphalangeal joint, not the MCP. Check the proximal interphalangeal joint. DIP. The DIP flexion is by FDP, flexor digitorum profundus. Don't get confused here. MCP is by lumbricals. Proximal interphalangeal joint is by FDS or flexor digitorum superficialis. The distal IP joint flexion is by the FDP. So this is the way to check it. And the test for FDP is you stabilize the middle phalanx. Here you stabilize the proximal phalanx and check for movement of the middle phalanx. Here you stabilize the middle phalanx and check for movement of the distal phalanx. Okay. And this is how to check the FPL. Again, you stabilize the proximal phalanx and check the FP or the IP joint movement, right? You stabilize the proximal phalanx and check movement of the distal phalanx of the thumb. And how to check for FCR? FCR is nothing but the wrist should go for palmar flexion and a radial deviation. So you give resistance here. If you do the same action with an ulnar deviation, then you are checking FCU, flexor carpi ulnaris. Whereas if you do the same palmar flexion with a radial deviation, then you are checking FCR. And how to check for palmaris longus? You just ask the patient to touch the thumb and little finger and then give resistance while they try to do palmar flexion. You can even check it in your own hand. close to, I think if I'm correct, about 10 to 20% of individuals don't have palmaris longus tendon. Okay, so you can verify whether you have it. You just do this and give resistance when, hope I can show it in the camera, I'm not very sure. See, the tendon is standing out. So I have palmaris longus, you can check if you have it, okay? Because some individuals don't have it anatomically. How to check for pronator strength? Keep the elbow in mid flexion and mid pronation and ask them to complete the pronation. If the pronation is weak, the pronator teres and pronator quadratus are affected. And like we discussed earlier, the palm as well as the finger, they are lost. Because if it is only in low median nerve palsy or a pure low median nerve palsy, only the fingertips are lost. Whereas if it is a high median nerve palsy, the entire palm and lateral 3.5 fingers, they are lost. Okay. And I forgot to mention that the autonomous zone for median nerve is the tip of index finger, right? Because the ring as well as the thumb may have some crossover on the ventral side. Okay. But the tip of index finger is the anatomic zone for median nerve. There is a few syndromes of interest. One is the anterior interosseous syndrome or the Keloneven syndrome, where the pure motor branch of the median nerve, that alone is affected. Hope you remember the anatomy which we discussed earlier. This particular nerve supplies 3 muscles. Okay, it supplies the flexor pollicis longus, pronator quadratus, and the lateral half of FDP. So only these 3 muscles are lost. Sensation is still intact. Now, this type of nerve pathology can occur in pediatric fractures, like in supracondylar fractures, completely displaced supracondylar fractures. There, this component is specifically damaged. Okay, and the sign to check it is ask the patient to do this OK sign. We call it as a O sign or the OK sign. This is the normal hand where there is a perfect O figure which is possible, whereas when this is in people with this particular syndrome, you can see that the thumb flexion is lost. You can see the thumb flexion, the FPL, flexor pollicis longus, is responsible for the thumb IP joint flexion. That is lost here, right? And the IP joint flexion of the index, the FDP of the index finger, that is lost. So whenever you ask the patient to do this OK sign, they will be doing this sign. Okay. This is called the Keloneven sign. Now, treatment. Discussed in radial palsy, there are 2 presentations. Patient can come early and the patient can come late. If they come early, there is an early presentation. And if we determine the cause to be a compression syndrome, nerve release is the treatment option. But if it is an lacerated wound or open cut wound, you repair. And if it is a post injury, delayed or immediate repair can be planned. And if it is late presentation, then we have to go for tendon transfer. And the problem here is all the sensation is on the palmar aspect. So we will have to warn the patient not to touch objects which are too hot as well as too cold, because they won't be able to feel it and they can get burns in the hands. Therefore, we'll have to protect the insensate skin from burns and other injuries. Now, with regards to conservative management, these are the splints which we use for median nerve palsy. Can anybody tell me what we use for radial nerve palsy? What is the name of splint for radial nerve palsy?
Cock-up splint.
Yeah. Any variant of cock-up splint? There are 2 types of cock-up splint.
Dynamic and static.
Very good. Dynamic and static. The static cock-up splint just maintains the wrist dorsiflexion, whereas the static cock-up splint, the dynamic cock-up splint also maintains the fingers and they are held with rubber bands, and the patient can also do exercises using this splint. Okay. Similarly, the problem in median nerve palsy is intrinsic minus hand, otherwise the claw hand. What we do, we apply a splint to maintain the intrinsic plus position. Are you able to understand this? See, the problem in claw hand is this position, the intrinsic minus position, and we apply a splint which causes MCP flexion, right, to maintain this position. And this, in layman's term, is a knuckle bend. Hope you all know these are the knuckles. You just maintain the knuckle bend. Okay, that's why it is called the knuckle bender splint. And there is another type of splint, the C-bar splint, which is shown here. This is nothing but the adductor pollicis supplied by the ulnar nerve. So when the abductors are lost, the thumb goes into adduction. And if you leave it for longer duration, it causes contracture of the adductor pollicis. In order to prevent the adductor contracture, you maintain this position, right? It also helps in opposition of the thumb. Now, with regards to tendon transfer, there are many procedures. A few of them are actually confusing and hard to remember. In one particular slide, I have just tried to simplify everything. So if you remember this alone, it's enough for the exam purpose. Okay. Now there are certain movements which are lost, and we have to compensate those. That is the principle in this tendon palsy. I mean tendon transfer. So thumb opposition is lost. So we can use the donor muscle can be abductor digiti minimi, which is supplied by the ulnar nerve, or the extensor indicis proprius, right? So that can be used to compensate for it is rerouted. The tendon is detached from its original insertion, rerouted and attached to the base of thumb to give the opponent's action. DIP joint flexion. DIP joint flexion, that is lost. So ECRL, if you all remember, it is on the dorsal side, right? In the second extensor compartment that can be rerouted and attached to the FDP tendons. Now, this is done in case of total claw hand. Now, if there is a pure median claw hand, the ulnar nerve is still intact. The medial half of FDP will be still functioning. So, what can we do is we just attach those tendons to the intact tendons. You can just stitch the tendons which are actually supplied by the median nerve to the tendons which are supplied by the ulnar nerve. So, using the ulnar nerve alone, the distal interphalangeal joint flexion can be achieved. But the problem here is, since it should contract all 4 fingers, some amount of muscle power is lost. So in those cases, you can use ECRL tendon. Now, how to achieve thumb IP flexion? Thumb IP flexion. The brachioradialis can be used. It is detached from here. It attaches to the radial styloid. It is detached and attached to the FDP, right? Sorry, or the FPL. Okay, sorry, FPL. So, cause the flexor pollicis longus. And how to do thumb abduction? The extensor indicis proprius, which we saw here, can also be rerouted to the abductor pollicis brevis to cause thumb abduction. Okay, any doubts still here? Any doubts? Was I too fast? Do I need to slow down? Do you want to repeat any test? Because all these tests are very important in your exam. See, you can even skip this tendon transfer. It is a bit complex to understand, but you have to determine what is the nerve involved and what is the level of nerve injury involved. That is very important for final year exams. Okay, so there should be no confusion in it. Anybody wants me to repeat any part of the median nerve palsy?
No, sir.
Okay, fine. So we'll move on to ulnar nerve now. Like the median nerve, which is called the labradus nerve, there is also another name for the ulnar nerve. Can anybody tell me what it is?
Musician.
Very good, very good, very good. Doctor, can you tell me your name?
Shruti, sir.
Very good, doctor. Very good, Dr. Shruti. Fine. So this is called the musician's nerve because the fine, intricate movements of the fingers, median nerve, the fist, forming a fist and hard grips, right? The actions which involve powerful movement need median nerve, whereas actions which involve fine movements need the ulnar nerve. That's why ulnar nerve is called the musician's nerve. A brief review of the anatomy. Like the median nerve, the ulnar nerve doesn't have any branch in the arm. It is derived from C8 T1 nerve roots, and it continues as an extension of the medial cord, right? And it travels on the medial aspect of the arm, and just above the elbow, it travels through the cubital tunnel, which is a tunnel created by the fibrous sheath posterior to the medial epicondyle. It travels through this tunnel and then enters the forearm, traveling between the two heads of flexor carpi ulnaris. Now it supplies these muscles, the FCU. We saw in the median nerve that except FCU, all other anterior forearm muscles are supplied by the median nerve. So FCU and flexor digitorum profundus medial half is supplied by the ulnar nerve, and the intrinsic muscles on the hypothenar side of the hand. See, this is the thenar side, this is the hypothenar side. All the muscles on the hypothenar side are supplied by the ulnar nerve. The motor functions are the finger adduction, abduction, right? Forget the thumb, finger adduction and abduction, flexion of and the intrinsic of the little and ring finger. These are by the ulnar nerve. And sensory over as depicted in this picture here. The medial 1.5 of the hand is by the ulnar nerve. And if you want to go into the details of the intrinsic muscles, this is the list here. The palmaris brevis, abductor digiti minimi, opponens digiti minimi, flexor digiti quintae. All these muscles, along with the dorsal and palmar interossei and the ulnar 2 lumbricals. See, we saw there were 4 lumbricals, 1 and 2 supplied by median nerve, 3 and 4 supplied by the ulnar nerve. In addition to this, flexor pollicis brevis, deep head, as well as the adductor pollicis. These are supplied by the ulnar nerve. And review about the, to get a clear idea about the palmar and dorsal interossei, just remember this mnemonic, PAD. Palmar interossei adduct. Okay, palmar interossei adduct, whereas dorsal interossei abduct. Now, with regards to human anatomy, whenever particular part of the body comes close to the midline, we call it as adduction, and when it goes away from the midline, we call it as abduction, abduction, adduction, and abduction. Whereas, with regards to hand, the axis of the middle finger is considered to be the median point or the median axis. So movement towards the middle finger, we call it as adduction, and movement away from the middle finger, we call it as abduction. Okay, that is the reason the middle finger does not have any palmar interossei. Are you able to get the point here? Because this stays where it is. There is no movement of adduction for the middle finger, whereas there is movement of adduction for the index finger, ring finger, and little finger. See, the middle finger doesn't move. It stays where it is because that is the axis, and it doesn't have any palmar interossei. Did I convey the point clear? Did I convey the message clear? Any doubts? Do anybody wants me to repeat this? Because actually anatomically there are 4 palmar interossei, whereas the first one usually it is not possible to test it separately from the adductor pollicis. The action of the palmar, the adductor pollicis and the first palmar interossei is both adduction of the thumb, right? So we can't check the palmar interossei, first palmar interossei separately. Therefore, it is usually neglected here. Only these 3 muscles are checked. Okay. Whereas when you come to dorsal interossei, here even the middle finger can move. Otherwise, if you consider this hand as the table, and now you can see that the middle finger, this is abduction on one side, this is abduction on the other side. Okay. So that is the reason why the middle finger has got 2 dorsal interossei. Are you able to understand how to check for the dorsal interossei? See, this is one abduction, this is one abduction, right? And this is another abduction, this is another abduction. Okay. The middle finger has got 2 dorsal interossei, and the ring and the index finger have their own dorsal interossei. And the little finger has got the abductor digiti minimi, that has got a separate abductor. So we have got 4 dorsal interossei, which causes finger abductions, 4 palmar interossei, which causes finger adduction, adduction. Any confusion here? Because if you get confused here, you won't be able to check these muscles clearly in the exam. So we'll go on to low ulnar nerve palsy. The lesion here is at the level just below the flexor carpi retinaculum. Otherwise, what we call it as the Guyon's canal. This is the Guyon's canal. The nerve passes through this canal, which is bounded on one side by the pisiform bone and other side by the hamate. And the pisohamate ligament forms the roof of this tunnel, right? The nerve passes through this tunnel and then enters into the hypothenar. Now, any pathology like fracture of the hamate bone or fracture of the pisiform bone can cause problem here. And in chronic or long duration cycle riders, this is the position usually where they keep the wrist. The pressure of the nerve on this aspect can cause low ulnar nerve palsy. So what are the problems here? The loss of sensation over the medial 1.5 fingers, loss of action of the intrinsic. Just a minute, I will try to, fine. So the 3 and 4 lumbricals, they are lost, right? Therefore, this intrinsic plus position on the medial 2 fingers is lost. You can see that there is very good extension of the lateral 3 fingers, whereas there is some amount of flexion deformity of the medial 2 fingers. Okay. And how to check for the adductors? Okay. Like I said earlier, for the abductors, you check the individual muscle, the index finger abduction, ring finger abduction. For the middle finger, you just raise it from the hand. Otherwise, if I try to show this, okay, are you able to see now? Okay, index finger abduction, ring finger abduction. For the middle finger, this is one abduction, this is another abduction. Clear? And for the little finger, this is by abductor digiti minimi. Okay. And how to check the adduction? Usually we do it by performing the card test, which is known as the Igawa's card test. Okay, you check the adduction. Yeah, how to do this test? You just ask the patient to hold a card like this, right? Now, the wrong method of doing this card test is asking the patient to hold the card like this and trying to pull it this way. This is a wrong method. The examiners will not accept it because you are checking the power of your strong flexors with weak adductors. Okay, what you should do is you should also hold the card the same way, right? Consider this hand as the patient's hand, and the patient is holding the card like this. You hold the card the same way and try to pull it. Okay, if the patient has got a good grip, the muscle is functioning well. If you are able to pull out the card, then the muscle action is lost. Likewise, if the patient holds between these two hands, you should also hold between these two hands, try to pull it out, right? And the same for the other hand as well. So never hold the card like this. If the patient is holding this way, you should not pull out the card this way. Am I clear? Are you able to understand this? Because this test should not be done using the wrong method. Okay. And what is Wartenberg sign? Because the abductor digiti minimi, this action is lost. Whenever you ask the patient to keep the hand like this, the little finger alone will be out. Okay. And here one characteristic complaint by the patient. If the patient is a male or a female, whenever they try to insert their hand into the pant pockets, see, whenever you try to insert your hand into your pant pocket, there should be full adduction of all fingers, right? If suppose the little finger alone stands out, whenever the patient tries to insert, consider this is the pocket, okay? They should be able to insert like this. If the little finger stands out, they won't be able to do. The little finger will stand out of the pocket margin. This patient have come to the clinic telling this as a complaint. They are not able to insert their hand into the pocket, okay? This is called Wartenberg's sign. Now, how to check the adductor pollicis brevis? The Fromen sign, otherwise the book test. I'll try to get a book around me. I think I'll use my mobile phone. Okay, are you able to see? Right? Are you able to see it now? Okay, the book test. The patient is using both the adductor, not the patient should use only the adductor of the thumb, not the flexor. The flexor FPL is supplied by the median nerve. Okay. So whenever you try to ask the patient to hold a book like this and you try to pull it out, if the adductor power is lost, the patient will try to compensate it by using the flexor pollicis longus. So the moment you try to pull it out, you can observe that the IP joint is going for flexion, right? This IP flexion is by FPL. This is called the Fromen sign, which is elicited by performing the book test. And this is another sign by a similar maneuver. This is called the Jean sign. In cases of long duration palsy, long-stand palsy, the deep head of the flexor pollicis brevis is also wasted. If you remember, like I told earlier, flexor pollicis brevis has got dual nerve supply. It is supplied both by the median as well as by the ulnar nerve. Whereas in long duration cases, the deep head of this particular muscle is wasted. And therefore, whenever you do this test, in addition to flexion of the IP joint, there is also extension of the MCP joint, right? Compare this picture here. See here, the MCP is still flexed, okay? Whereas in this picture, there is hyperextension of the MCP joint. So in addition to IP flexion, hyperextension of MCP, this is called Jeans sign. Another clear explanation of the Jeans sign, the hyperextension of the thumb, okay? And how to check for palmaris brevis. The palmaris brevis is situated here. You can check it on your own hand. Try to form a powerful fist. You will observe that the skin in this particular area is stretched. Otherwise, it is tensed. I will show it in my hand. See, are you able to see? The skin in this particular area will get tensed. That is because of the palmaris brevis muscle. Opponent's digitae minimi. See, you can't check the opponent's digitae minimi by a test. How we assess it is, whenever this muscle is intact, there is actually a smooth arch formed by the knuckles, right? If you see your own knuckles, they are not in a straight line. They are in an arch. This we call it as the palmar or the metacarpal arch, okay? Whenever this muscle is paralyzed, the arch is flattened. It is totally flat, okay? This is called the Massey's sign because of paralysis of the opponent's digitae minimi. How to check the abductor digitae minimi? You just need to check the little finger abduction. There is one more sign called the confrontation sign. It is nothing but you ask the patient to spread his own fingers and try to or ask them to push their two hands contacting the little finger point. Okay. Whenever one side is weak, the little finger on that particular side will collapse. Are you able to understand? You just ask the patient to spread his fingers and try to compress both hands together with a contact point at the level of little finger. So when the two little fingers confront each other, the paralyzed side will collapse. So this is called the confrontation sign. So so that completes the low ulnar nerve palsy. And will any doubts till now with regards to low ulnar nerve palsy? Was any test not clear? Should I demonstrate any test again?
No, sir.
We have 43 participants online. No doubts. It actually disappoints me. I was expecting some doubt here. Okay, fine. We'll move on to high ulnar nerve palsy. Here the problem again is at the level of the elbow. It can occur in anesthetized patient. See, whenever there is a patient who undergoes long duration surgery, say for about 3 to 4 hours, the patient has to lie supine on a particular operating table. You have to concentrate where the upper limb is rested. See, if it is not supported properly, the edge of that operating table can compress here, can compress at the medial epicondyle or the region posterior to the medial epicondyle, and this will compress the ulnar nerve, giving rise to high ulnar nerve palsy. It is also possible in bedridden patients and in certain conditions like a fracture non-union of the lateral condyle of humerus. Okay, see, this is the lateral condyle of humerus. A fracture non-union of this part can slowly cause a valgus deformity of the elbow. See, the ulnar nerve, which is situated on the medial side, slowly goes into traction injury. Okay, traction, slow traction. This we call it as the tardy ulnar nerve palsy. Okay, this problem doesn't manifest immediately. It happens very slowly. Okay, so as the cubitus valgus deformity is exaggerated, the nerve is stretched. Otherwise, it undergoes traction deformation and gives rise to tardy ulnar nerve palsy. And otherwise, the most common is the cubital tunnel syndrome, like the carpal tunnel syndrome for the median nerve, cubital tunnel syndrome for the ulnar nerve. It passes through the tunnel, the osteofibrous tunnel bounded by the Osborn's fascia and the medial epicondyle and the olecranon. As it passes through this tunnel, any pathology within this tunnel can give rise to cubital tunnel syndrome. So what are the things to check for? like all nerve injuries, the findings which were present in low palsy will also be present. In addition to them, these will also be present. Loss of FCU. Like for FCR, I said palmar flexion and radial deviation. For FCU, it is palmar flexion and ulnar deviation. So that is lost. And FTP, checking the flexor tendons. See, IP joint flexion of the little and ring finger. Okay, little and ring finger. And loss of sensation of the ulnar aspect of the palm. Right? Now, there is a unique concept here, which we call it as the ulnar paradox. Now, in case of high ulnar nerve palsy, the FDP tendons are lost. Are you all with me? Do you all understand? In case of high ulnar nerve palsy, the FDP to the 4th and 5th finger is lost, in addition to the loss of lumbricals, which happens in the hand. Okay, so this causes clawing, but the extent of clawing is less. Okay, the extent of clawing is less, whereas in low ulnar nerve palsy, there is sparing of the FDP because the problem is here. The lesion of the nerve is at the level of the wrist, and the FDP, which is in the forearm, is spared, so it will still function. Okay, so the FDP tendon will cause flexion of the IP joint, and this causes more clawing. Are you able to understand? In case of high palsy, since involvement of FDP is present, there is less amount of clawing. You can see this picture. The amount of clawing is less in case of high palsy, whereas in case of low palsy, since this tendon is spared, there is more clawing because this action will continue. The finger flexion will continue, increasing the or exaggerating the clawing. This is called as ulnar paradox. So the lesion is high, the problem is less, but the lesion is low, the problem is more. This we call it as a paradox. Okay, any doubts in this? Anybody wants me to repeat this? Because this is a very favorite question for an examiner. Whenever you have an ulnar claw hand, you can be very sure that the examiner is going to ask you this question. He will ask you what is ulnar paradox. You will have to explain this phenomenon to him. So likewise, the treatment, early presentation, late presentation, the principles are the same. See, the principles for management of any peripheral nerve injury is the same. Whenever it is early, if it is a compression syndrome, you try to release it. If it is an open injury, you try to repair it. If it is a closed, then you have to decide, depending upon the clinical situation, whether you have to go for immediate repair or a delayed repair. And if it is a late presentation, you'll have to do tendon transfer. Now, like the median nerve, where the sensation is on the palmar surface, in the ulnar nerve, again, it is on the palmar surface of the 4th and 5th finger. Therefore, again, you have to protect the skin from burns and injuries. And the tendon transfer here is very similar to the median nerve. Here we desire MCP flexion of the 4th and 5th finger. Again, we can use the ECRL tendon. Extensor carpi radial is longest, which is supplied by the posterior interosseous nerve, and attach it to the intrinsic tendons, and FD or FDS, and attach it to the flexor sheath. There have been surgeons' name attached to this: Brand transfer and Zancoli transfer. And for F2 abduction, right? You can use EPB, extensor pollicis brevis, or extensor indicis proprius, because only these two actions are more important in ulnar nerve palsy. Now, with regards to splint, again, since this is an extrinsic minus position for the 4th and 5th finger, you convert it to extrinsic plus position by using a knuckle bender splint involving only these two fingers. Right? For total claw hand, you use the total knuckle bender splint. For median, you use the knuckle bender for the 2nd and 3rd finger. For ulnar, you use splints for the 4th and 5th finger, like it is shown here. This is the ulnar knuckle bender splint. Okay, so that completes the topic today. Time for doubts. Any clarification needed? Is there any question in the chat box? Santosh, can you try to find? Okay, here is the chat box. Any questions, Santosh?
No, sir.
Okay.
Sir, could you
Any
please?
doubts, please unmute yourself. And ulnar paradox is not
Sir,
clear.
one question in
Okay,
the
fine.
chat box.
We'll explain. Yeah, he wants me to, Dr. Praveen Raj, he wants me to explain the ulnar paradox. I will explain it. Fine. Right. See, what is a paradox? A paradox is nothing but a combination or a situation where two opposing concepts occur together. See, in case of a high ulnar nerve palsy, naturally or obviously you expect the clawing to be more. Dr. Praveen Raj, are you able to hear me? Unmute yourself so that we can have an interaction. Praveen Raj? Still is muted.
Hello, sir.
Fine. Dr. Praveen Raj, how are you?
Hi, sir. Fine, sir.
Okay, see, when we give a name like high ulnar nerve palsy, you naturally expect the problem to be more because higher the lesion, more is the pathology. Do you agree?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sir, your
See, in
flexion
case of a
is
high median
also,
nerve palsy,
sir.
yeah, I'll come to that. I'll come to that. See, in case of a high radial nerve palsy, the problem is more. In case of a low radial nerve palsy, the problem is less. This is what is the natural way of thinking, right? Whereas in case of high ulnar nerve palsy, okay, there is less clawing because in case of high ulnar nerve palsy, the FDP tendons of the fourth and fifth finger is lost. Otherwise, they are not going to contract because the nerve supply to these tendons is also lost. Okay, these two tendons are responsible for the DIP flexion. Do you agree?
Yes,
are you able to follow till now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so when this is lost, the amount of clawing that is present in the hand will be less. Whereas in case of low ulnar nerve palsy, the lesion is here, close to the level of the Guyon's canal or the wrist joint. So these tendons which are in the forearm, the FDP for the fifth and fourth finger will still act. Okay, they are not countered by the lumbrical muscle. Okay, the MCP flexion is not happening, right? So automatically the MCP will go into hyperextension. Now, because of the stretching that happens here and the intact FDP tendon to the fourth and fifth finger, the clawing is exaggerated. Now, are you able to understand?
So, but
okay, because the MCP
flexion has to be affected, sir. But in flexion, agudde, sir.
Where?
The interphalangeal flexion, sir.
See, no. You don't get confused there. See, concentrate on the MCP. See, the lateral, otherwise the 3 and 4 MCP is lost. Okay, fine. Now I am able to get your doubt. See, try to keep your hand in this position. Okay, see, you're a normal person, right? All your nerves and muscles are working. Try to keep your hand in this position. See, naturally the fingers go into extension. Why? Can you tell me why? Can you tell me why? See, if you keep your hand in this position, yeah. See, the extensors on this side are stretched. Do you agree?
Yes, sir.
See, whenever you keep your wrist in full palmar flexion, you are a normal person. See, I am a normal person. All my muscles and tendons are still working. But still, whenever I passively keep my wrist in full palmar flexion, automatically my fingers go into extension. That is because the extensors, otherwise the extensors on the dorsal aspect of forearm are stretched, causing this. Okay. Whereas, if you do this, naturally the finger goes into flexion. You need not contract your muscle. Okay, you need not contract your muscle. Naturally, the finger, because that is because of the soft tissue tension in the muscles. The same concept applies here. See, whenever the lumbricals are lost, there is hyperextension of the MCP. Okay, so whenever there is hyperextension of MCP, naturally the finger flexes. You need not flex the finger to cause clawing. Okay, clawing is a passive phenomenon. It is not an active phenomenon. The patient is not contracting his muscle to show clawing. The clawing happens by itself, by nature itself, okay? Because the MCP is hyperextended, the flexor tendons are stretched. naturally causing clawing. Okay. So
Okay.
when the muscle is paralyzed, the clawing is less. When the muscle is intact, the basic tone of the muscle causes further clawing.
Okay, sir.
Are you able to understand now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
See, when the muscle has an intact nerve supply, the tone is increased. See, do you understand that any muscle which has lost its nerve supply will become hypotonic? Do you agree to this? The natural tone in the muscle is lost when it loses its nerve supply. But any intact muscle has a tone. What is tone? It is the resting contraction of a muscle. Are you able to get it?
Yes, sir.
So, in case of a low nerve palsy, the tone of FDP is still present. The patient need not contract. Okay, the tone is still present. Therefore, the clawing is exaggerated. Whereas, in case of a high palsy, the tone is lost. Therefore, the amount of clawing is less.
Yes, sir. Okay, sir.
Are you able to understand now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. Still, if you have some doubt, there are some good YouTube videos which actually show, explain this even better. Okay, there are some animations to explain this even better. Whenever you have time, you just go and watch them. You will understand it better. Okay, it's good that you asked a question. So doubts actually kindle my interest as well. Any more chat box? Any more in the chat? Okay, it's only you who has typed. Okay, anybody else got have any doubt? Because nerve palsy is a definite case in your final year examination. Leave alone the treatment options. The examiners will forgive you if you don't give the correct treatment options, but diagnosing the problem is important. You will have to clearly identify which nerve is involved and what is the level of lesion. So that is very important in exams. Okay, another person has asked, why F2 abduction is lost in ulnar nerve palsy? Okay, F2 you mean index finger, right? Index finger. Now, as I said earlier, with regards to adduction and abduction, okay, the middle finger is the axis. Now, this is F2 abduction. Dr. Neremori,
Yes,
can you unmute yourself and come online so that we can have an interaction? Right. Because I'll be able to follow only if you're, I will be able to see only if you're following me, okay?
yes,
So this is F2 abduction. Do you agree?
yes, sir.
Okay. This action is caused by the dorsal interossei to this muscle.
Okay.
Sorry, to this finger.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, sir.
The F2 abduction is by the dorsal interossei to the index finger. That muscle is supplied by the ulnar nerve. That
Okay.
is why this is lost. Fine.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, fine. Any other doubts? See, don't get confused by this movement. Okay. See, because you have to be clear that the middle finger is the axis here. You may say this is the ulnar side, this is the radial side, or this is the medial side and this is the lateral side. Okay, but with regards to abduction and adduction, the middle finger is the axis when it comes to hand. Okay. Any more doubts? Or any even we can discuss about the radial nerve. Any doubts in the radial nerve class which we had few weeks back?
Sir, good afternoon,
Yeah.
sir. Hello,
Good afternoon.
sir.
Yeah.
We put all of these splints for correcting the motor aspect of the palsy, sir. What do we do for the
Yeah.
sensation that is lost because of the nerve palsy, sir?
Very good. Very good question. You patient can wear protective gloves. Okay. Because both in median and ulnar nerve palsy, the sensation is lost only in the hands. Okay. Do
Okay,
you
sir.
agree?
Yes, sir.
So they can use protective gloves while they work very close to heat or extreme cold.
Okay,
Because even while cooking, if the individual tries to touch an object or a vessel which is very hot, they won't be able to feel the heat.
yes,
Therefore,
sir.
they will get thermal burns in the hand. So it is better to always use a protective glove a cotton glove, a simple cotton glove on their hands, so that which protects them from the heat or the cold. And over the glove, and whenever they don't work, okay, because the glove is not needed whenever they're resting or activities which doesn't involve heat. During all other simple works, you can just apply the knuckle bender splint. That will prevent the contracture. Okay, because if
Okay.
clawing gets contracture, if it goes in for contracture, the MCT capsules is the problem. Okay, because if the hand is left in this position for long duration, the capsules on the extensor side, right, they will get contracted, and this becomes a static deformity. You won't
Okay,
be
sir.
able to passively correct it. The
Yes, sir.
purpose of knuckle bender splint is to keep it as a flexible soft tissue, so that you can wait till the patient has a recovery, or if there is no recovery, then you can go and do the tendon transfer.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Fine. Welcome. Any other doubts? It's good that you people ask doubt. Thank you. Any other doubts?
Brachial plexus injury considered under any eye lesion for palmar.
Sorry?
Like brachial plexus injury, sir.
Yeah.
Can it be considered under eye lesion of ulnar nerve, like Klumpke's palsy?
No, actually, brachial plexus injuries is a totally different topic, doctor. The reason is because there it involves the nerve roots. It doesn't involve the nerves. Okay. The clinical examination, the diagnosis and management of brachial plexus is totally different. Because I didn't cover those, because usually in undergraduate examination, we don't keep brachial plexus palsy. Maybe you can have a neonate with Erb's palsy. That is possible. Okay, with regards to Erb's palsy. Erb's palsy, nothing, the child will be, say, a newborn or a baby of about 10 to 15 days old with a typical posture of Erb's palsy. Well, that may be a case in your exam. But an adult with brachial plexus palsy, that is for postgraduate examination, and it's a bit complicated to explain everything and to arrive at a diagnosis and management option. So usually brachial plexus in adults is not kept as an undergraduate case for examination. Okay, that's why I've neglected it. But if you want to know it, we can have a separate class on it, because even one more case is foot drop, sciatic nerve palsy, and foot drop is an exam case for you. If time permits, I will try to prepare a class on it, and we will have a discussion on brachial plexus as well as foot drop later. Okay.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah. Now, with regards to these three nerves, because these are definite cases in your exam. So with regards to these three nerves, any doubts?
Sir,
Still 35 or online? Yeah, somebody's trying to ask a question. Yeah. Yes, doctor.
sir, is there any deformity related to the damage to the flexor forearm muscle, sir? Do we do
Sorry, doctor,
any
I'm not able to
management?
get you.
The flexor muscles also damaged in the median now, no, sir. We are putting splint
Yeah.
for the hand muscle, hand deformity. Is there any we do for the forearm muscle, sir?
You're asking for the IP joint flexor, long flexors of the IP joints, right? Is that your question?
No, sir. About the if the flexors are done, will the hand be in the
Doctor,
extensor position?
doctor, just name a muscle. Doctor, name a muscle.
Flexor.
Okay, I will name it for you. See, if you are asking about flexor digitorum profundus, okay, flexor digitorum profundus causes IP joint flexion. See, like I said earlier, if it is peripheral neuropathy involving both ulnar and median nerve, okay, both lobes of the FDP is lost. FDP has got dual nerve supply. It is supplied by the ulnar and medial nerve. This is a very difficult situation to treat. Whereas if it is an isolated ulnar nerve or an isolated median nerve, then the remaining slips, see, the FDP is supplied by two nerves, okay? The FDP tendons for the index and middle is lost in median, and ring and little finger is lost in ulnar. You can use these tendons and you can stitch those tendons to, there is a procedure where you attach the distal ends of those tendon, and you tether them to the remaining acting tendons. So one particular muscle, you can use the nerve supply from ulnar nerve alone to cause flexion of all four fingers. We discussed in the tendon transfer slide, right? Like here. I'll try to show it. See, DIP joint flexion, right? DIP joint flexion. This is for median nerve palsy where these two are lost. The IP joint flexion of F2 and F3 is lost. Here, you can use ECRL, which is supplied by the radial nerve or the posterior interosseous nerve. That can be rerouted to these two tendons. This is one procedure. Otherwise, you can use the remaining two slips. The tendon which contracts these two fingers can be tethered along with these two fingers so that one single muscle will cause all finger flexion. The problem here is, since it involves four fingers, the action is a bit weaker. Whereas if you do the ECRL transfer, this is separate. You can do individually, right? Now this is for FDP. The other long tendon is the FDS, okay? Flexor digitorum superficialis, which is responsible for PIP joint flexion. Now, usually you need not to have separate muscles for the PIP as well as DIP. The DIP flexion will in turn cause PIP flexion as well. So this is a trade-off between the extensive surgery, because that will be something very extensive, which will not be anatomical as well. So you just address the DIP flexion. This will itself cause PIP flexion also. Fine. Is this the doubt you wanted to ask?
Yes, sir. And for pronator quadratus and pronator teres injury, sir.
There are usually pronation can be compensated by the gravity. Okay, because if you try to lift your elbow by gravity, you can try to rotate your hand. That is not a very vital action. Okay, if needed, you can do other transfers as well. There are procedures, many procedures. In one particular slide, I have just targeted to address very vital movements. Okay, you can, if one particular muscle is lost, you can try to compensate it. Otherwise, there are many procedures. You can also do nerve transfer. Okay, if that particular muscle is not working, you can also do nerve transfer. But covering everything will be too extensive and too confusing for your level. That is why I have just simplified it to one slide. Because management of nerve palsy is a very big topic. If you still have doubts, you can always ask, get my number from Santosh, and you'll have a discussion, right? Even for pronation, there are procedures. I have not listed them here. There are procedures.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, welcome, doctor. Any more in the chat box? Still 31 are online. Expecting a few more doubts?
Again, sir.
Yeah, very good. Okay, fine. I don't have an anatomical specimen with me right now. Okay. Okay. Consider my wrist as my elbow. Okay. And consider this as the medial epicondyle. The ulnar nerve passes here, right? In case of fracture of the lateral condyle, and there is a non-union here, slowly the elbow will go towards the valgus position. Do you agree? Because there is no support on this side, and the elbow will go into an exaggerated valgus position. Do you agree?
Yes, sir.
Fine. Now what will happen to the nerve here? And you see what is happening here. It is being subjected to traction. Okay, the nerve is stretched apart. Okay, but this doesn't happen on a single day, because the proximal migration of the fractured fragment here takes few months to develop. There is a non-union here, and slowly the elbow goes into valgus position, causing traction on the medial side, and therefore the nerve palsy occurs in a very slow rate. Tardy means slow. Okay, so this is the reason for tardy ulnar nerve palsy. Clear now?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay, yeah. Usually, I used to have some anatomy specimens to explain, but since it is an online class and I'm at my friend's place, I'm not able to show you any specimens. If you have a bone model and if you draw the ulnar nerve on that particular side, it will be very clear to you. Hope I was able to do some justice using my wrist. Now, Dr. Santosh, anything else? What is the percentage of final years in today's class? Hope there were some pre-final years as well. Is it or it was only final years?
Sir, almost final year, sir. Maybe 1 or 2 pre-finals will be there.
Okay, okay, fine, okay. So shall we conclude the meeting then?
Yes, okay, sir. Yeah, thank you, sir.
Yeah, fine, okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.